It's the Michael Patrick Leahy Show, broadcasting live from downtown Nashville. Now, here's Michael Patrick Leahy.
Good morning to the John Fredericks Media Network. Michael Patrick Leahy here. We are indeed broadcasting live from our studios in downtown Nashville, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee State Capitol. Okay, let's get right to it. Here is the morning rundown for Thursday, January 30th. Brought to you by the Glock Store, glockstore.com, located just a few miles from the airport, right here in Nashville. So here we go. Here's a morning rundown for Thursday, January 30th. Number one, airplane crash last night, just about 9 p.m. Eastern Time at Reagan National Airport, DCA in Washington, D.C. No survivors. 64 people on an American airline commuter flight from Wichita, Kansas, was hit by a military helicopter that had 3 people on board. And you can see it as the plane was descending. It was hit by that helicopter. An explosion took place. It was about 350 feet above the Potomac River. The helicopter and 2 parts of the airplane fell into the Potomac. They had a rescue operation, but early this morning, they said it's a recovery operation now. No survivors. Bad news. We'll have more on that in a bit. Number 2, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. testimony on Capitol Hill yesterday before a Senate committee. And again, the Democrats revealed themselves to be total clowns. We'll have a little bit of that and some commentary from Matt Boyle, who will be with us in our next segment. Number 3, the Tennessee General Assembly special session continues today. They're looking at 3 things: the Education Freedom Act, immigration assistance for the Trump administration, and flood relief for East Tennessee. We are told that the vote in the House on Education Freedom Act could happen as soon as this morning. And we spoke directly with Speaker of the House, Cam Sexton, yesterday. The vote count is expected to be somewhere between 52 and 55 yes votes in the House, where the issue has been of concern. What that means is you only need 50 to get a majority. We expect today what will happen is the House will pass the bill, and then that bill will be presented to the state Senate, where it will easily pass. And Governor Bill Lee it will be sent to Governor Bill Lee, and it'll be signed into law sometime next week. That's what we think will happen, but curveballs abound. Number 4, last night in the Tennessee General Assembly, a bunch of leftist protesters disrupted a hearing on the immigration bill, where they're basically instructing Tennessee law enforcement to assist the Trump administration. We'll have more details on that. Number 5, today, more congressional hearings in Washington, D.C., confirmation hearings, Kash Patel at the FBI, and Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence. Number 6, the open Michigan Senate seat. The Democrat, Gary Peters, says he's not running again. Who is going to replace him? Well, that election will be in 2026, and we'll hear from Cheryl Fritz of the Michigan News Source in our second hour. And number 7, right after this break, we're going to hear from the great Matt Boyle, my friend and former boss at Breitbart News, who got the second question at Carolyn Leavitt's press conference at the White House yesterday. So we'll have all that. So there you go. That's the morning rundown for Thursday, January 30th. 2025, brought to you by the Glock Store. You've heard me talk about my good friend Lenny McGill and glockstore.com. Here are a few more fun facts. And this is true. Lenny McGill is famous in the Glock world, especially with the people who depend on Glocks for their living and their lives. And I'm talking about police officers. The 800 number is answered by Glock experts at glockstore.com. If you've got a question, they have the answer. The Glock Store YouTube channel has over 500,000 subscribers, and over 800 videos with millions of views. And it's basically Lenny McGill showing you how to properly use a Glock and an accessory. Glockstore.com is one of the largest distributors of Glock handguns and is the largest producer of custom Glock handguns in the entire United States of America. Mr. McGill and both his sons work in the business, ensuring the most important people in the world are properly cared for, their customers. And let me go back. It's not just Mr. McGill. I misspoke there. Mr. McGill, Mrs. McGill, and both of their sons work in the business, Glockstore.com. So it's a family thing. And we've told you about the backstory. We'll get to that more. We've got to get Lenny in here to tell us more about the backstory. If you want to be treated like family, visit Glockstore.com and sign up for their emails at the bottom of the website. The best products, the best prices, and the best service. It's a Glockstore thing. Visit Glockstore.com to see for yourself. There you go, the Glockstore. All right, let's just get to the news today. It is not good. It is not good at all. Let's go with an official this morning basically stating there are no survivors. Here we go, clip 14.
We are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident. And we have recovered 27 people from the plane and 1 from the helicopter. The district office of the medical examiner has lead on reuniting these bodies and these people with their loved ones, and we will continue to work to find all the bodies and collect them and reunite them with their loved ones. We should also acknowledge that the Virginia medical examiner and the Army medical examiner are involved in this operation and a very important part of getting.
Okay, so this is a very somber and terrible announcement. Sean Duffy, who was confirmed as Secretary of Transportation on Tuesday, well, I think late Tuesday, I think 24 hours later, he's there on the scene and is in charge. And this is, it's quite a way to step into this job. Clip 19A, rather. Here's Sean Duffy.
Sean Duffy here, Secretary of Transportation. We wish we were gathering for different purposes today. I just want to let you know that the Department of Transportation, the FAA, along with the White House, President Trump, local, state, and federal partners, all working together on this incident in unison. I couldn't be prouder of this team that's been assembled, working tirelessly. Mayor, I want to thank you specifically for your work. A few details I'd like to give all of you, and some of you have reported this, but last night, if you live in the D.C. area, you would know that this was a clear night last night. The helicopter was in a standard pattern. If you live in the D.C. area, you'll see helicopters up and down the river. This flight pattern is seen oftentimes when you live in D.C. This was a standard flight pattern last night as well. The American airline flight coming into land was in a standard flight pattern as it was coming into DCA. So this was not unusual with a military aircraft flying the river and aircraft landing at DCA. And again, if you live in the area, you'll see that frequently with those 2 aircraft working together.
Well, let me just say, we'll break it here. There are so many questions here about this. This was not a survivable crash, and no question about that. If you look at the video, it's very disturbing because you see the plane coming in for a normal landing. Then you see the helicopter. And what it looks like is the helicopter was headed directly at a slight incline up to hit the plane. Lots of questions. Lots of questions. When we come back, Matt Boyle with Breitbart will join us. I'm Michael Patrick Leahy.
Welcome back to the Michael Patrick Leahy Show. Now, here's Michael Patrick Leahy.
We are joined on our newsmaker lines right now by my very good friend, my former boss at Breitbart, the Washington political editor for Breitbart, Matt Boyle. Good morning, Matt.
Hey, Mike. How's it going, sir?
Well, Matt, on Tuesday, really history was made at the White House press briefing. The new press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt, 27 years old, just turned in a terrific performance. And the second person who was allowed to ask a question was Matt Boyle with Breitbart News.
That's true.
That was something. And I noticed when you made the question, when you asked the question, you referenced the great Andrew Breitbart, who was the founder of Breitbart, gave you your first, well, not your first job, but one of your early journalistic efforts. Tell us about what that was like to be the second person to answer that question in the press conference.
Well, yeah, it feels like the things have really changed here in Washington and in the national media landscape, where the establishment legacy old guard media are fading, right? They're kind of like the dinosaurs, right? Like, and we're like the mammals, the new media, right? Like, we're coming along to replace them because we're doing things that they've failed to do over the last 20 years and really longer. But it's really come to the forefront in the era of technology with the internet and talk radio and so on and so forth. But what are we doing that they're not doing? We're asking legitimate questions about legitimate issues instead of trying to lecture and dictate to people how they're supposed to live their lives. We're actually trying to get information about interesting things and try to inform the public and challenge public officials. And we're doing what's called journalism, and they're doing what's called propaganda. And I think that as the establishment media collapses, and it's their own doing, by the way, like they could all fix their problems right now, then I think that as that happens, people are more and more turning to new places, whether that's Breitbart, and I'd argue we're kind of like the OGs, if you will.
You are. Breitbart is the old guard of the new media.
Yeah, we're the original gangsters, right?
Yeah.
So, but the point is that so we're the OGs of the new media, but there's tons of other ones out there too, right? There's other great conservative publications. You saw several of them called on in the press briefing yesterday. So I think that or the other day, time is blurring together at this point.
I had by the way, just so you know, Matt, I had to do the same thing. Time is moving so fast. I had to double check. Yeah. Now, was it Tuesday? Was it Wednesday? When was this press conference? Because things move so fast. I know, yeah.
No, exactly. And I'm literally outside the White House right now. I was about to go in and interview the vice president, but then this horrible plane crash. Things are kind of on hold today. But the point is that so we'll see when that happens. But the fact is that look, I think we're in a new era. I think that it's the dawn of a new age here, right? Like the old guard, they're collapsing, they're losing their influence. The new guys are coming in, and fresh blood is replacing them. And look, I think that's a healthy thing, right? Like this is a good thing for society. And either the dinosaurs are going to learn to be warm-blooded, or and actually ask real questions and actually focus on real issues and knock off the nonsense, like all the hoaxes they perpetrated against Donald Trump over the last 8 years, or they're going to go extinct, right? Like it's really that simple, right? So they can choose extinction or they can choose relevance and survival. And I think that as it stands right now, they're barreling down the pathway towards extinction, right? Like, and we're barreling down the pathway towards survival. And I think that they're in bad shape as an institution, generally speaking. There are exceptions to the rule. Don't get me wrong. I know I'm painting with a broad brush here. And there are some decent people that work at some of these places. Don't get me wrong. But generally speaking, these institutions have failed the American public, and it's time for fresh blood.
You know, my thought when Carolyn Leavitt stepped up there, and her performance was superb, A++, I thought.
Yeah.
Carolyn Leavitt, here was what I thought, Matt, and you'll get a kick out of this. I thought, she's 27 years old, and she's totally in command, and she's totally got all the facts. and she has them in her mind, in her brain, not in a binder. So the contrast was dramatic. 27 years old being that good. And you know what I thought? How appropriate that a rising conservative star in communications would then call on someone who back, I guess, when did you get your start? 2011, when you were just a recent college graduate in your early 20s. And I mean, it seems so appropriate that you started, I think you started with Daily Caller, did great investigative work there. Stephen K. Bannon, our mutual friend, hired you at Breitbart. You did such a great job. You became the Washington political editor. Now you're the original, you're part of the OG, and you've had, all these years, decades of experience now. I thought it was just so appropriate that a 27-year-old would call on one of the original new media investigative reporters.
Yeah, and I'll say this, Mike. One of the things I try to do, because I've been in the role now where I've led our political team at Breitbart now for almost a decade, right? It was around 2015, I want to say, when I stepped into the editor role from being just a reporter for the first few years here. I've been at Breitbart for more than 12 years, so it's almost 10 years in this position. I try to give and find young talent the next me, right? And that's constantly what I'm doing. I'm always trying to train young folks. And if you look across the rest of the conservative media, what we've built is not just one place, not just one institution. We've built a whole ecosystem that exists, right? There are alums that I've worked with that work at places, across the conservative media ecosphere. Some of them go into politics. Some of them have worked in the White House in the previous term. Other ones have gone into the administration or different other publications. And, I think that it's really fascinating to see this happen. We've literally, we identified a major problem, 15 years ago in the establishment media, the legacy media in this country, and we set out to fix it. And I'd argue we're doing that, right? And so, and the contrast between the way that we in the new media handle things and the way that they in the old media handle things, I think is abundantly clear.
It's stark.
During that press conference.
So you're outside the White House right now as we speak. You were scheduled to have an exclusive interview with Vice President J.D. Vance, but of course the tragic events of the plane crash last night have changed that. What's on your agenda?
Totally understandable.
Sure.
Don't blame the vice president. Right? We'll make it work at some point or another. But the fact is that this is just a tragedy. It appears as though, at least according to the officials this morning, are saying there are no survivors. So that's 67 people that are dead because of this senseless tragedy. And so hopefully we get some answers as to what happened and what went wrong. It's the first time in, I think, more than 15 years that we've had a domestic airline crash in the United States. So we got to figure out what went wrong, what happened here, what was the helicopter doing, what were the communication issues, and so on and so forth. And obviously these families of the deceased, as it appears, is so. Again, it doesn't look like there's any survivors. We were holding out hope all night last night as first responders were out there trying to rescue people, but it's just terrible news. And so this just totally rocked everybody's day. And again, totally understandable because you've got the entire government is having to respond to this, right? The Pentagon is involved, the Department of Homeland Security because of the Coast Guard, the Transportation Department, the NTSB, the White House, right? The local government, the fire departments, the government in Virginia, the government in Maryland, right? So there's a lot of coordinating going on here. So totally understand it. We'll get with the vice.
So, Matt, I've just got this breaking news. You're there at the White House and about to enter the White House itself, but breaking news, President Donald Trump is holding a press briefing on the D.C. aviation right now. So I think probably what you're going to want to do right now is head into the White House and get to that briefing. That's my guess.
We'll see. So we'll see if we can get in there. I don't know if he's doing it right now. So
that Right Side Broadcasting Network just created a live stream that says President Donald Trump holds a press briefing on D.C. aviation disaster. So
Yeah, that's news to me. So everything's very fast.
Here, Matt, this is Boyle and Leahy working again like we've done for over a decade at Breitbart.
This is like live on the air. Like
last point.
So your listeners get the inside scoop.
You and I worked very carefully, very closely, and were surprised back in 2013 when Senator Bob Menendez was found not guilty of bribery-related issues in 2013. Yeah. Yesterday, after another trial, he was sentenced to 11 years in prison.
Not long enough, right? And so I feel like that's a light sentence for this guy. He's a total crook. He's out there trying to act like Trump was right about all the justice system now that he's sentenced to 11 years in prison. Nobody should believe him. He's fishing for a pardon. He's a crook. And he's going where he belongs, and for not nearly long enough, right? Like, it feels like they went light on him.
Well,
right?
your investigative work,
25 years, right? Like
your investigative work back in the very first instance of the first trial, which he got off on. I mean, you documented all sorts of difficulties and problems, and I think it's karma that he's finally been convicted and is going to prison. Matt Boyle, thank you, and good luck with the Trump press conference in just a moment.
We'll see if we're able to make it there.
All right, cool. Matt Boyle, thanks for joining us. We'll be back with more after this. There you go, real-time news right here on the Michael Patrick Leahy Show.
Hey there, this is Lenny McGill, founder and CEO of the Glock Store. As a proud sponsor of this show, you may have heard Michael Patrick Leahy mention us a few times over the past 4 years. But today, it's me on the radio telling you how pleased we are to be associated with Michael Patrick Leahy and his dedication to the highest levels of professional journalism. Michael Patrick Leahy has been threatened with jail time in bringing the true facts about that Nashville Covenant shooting to his listening audience. Michael Patrick Leahy, you keep doing what you're doing, and we here at the Glock Store will keep sponsoring your show for the good of Nashville and the entire country. And I'm personally inviting all of your listeners to come visit and shoot at the Glock Store. It's where Michael Patrick Leahy learned to shoot a gun for the first time and where he bought his own personal Glock 19. I'm Lenny McGill, founder and CEO of the Glock Store here in Nashville, just minutes from the airports, worth the drive from anywhere, and a proud sponsor of Michael Patrick Leahy and the Tennessee Star Report.
Welcome back to the Michael Patrick Leahy Show. Now, here's Michael Patrick Leahy.
Welcome back. We're about to be joined by our lead political reporter, Tom Pappert, to talk about the crash in Washington, D.C. But breaking news just before we get to Tom, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has released a video just a few minutes ago about the Guantanamo Bay executive order, and he has some comments about the helicopter crash that crashed into the commercial flight, 67 people dead. Here we go. Pete Hegseth just a few minutes ago.
All right, update this morning. Just got off the phone with the Southcom commander and the chairman, the Joint Chiefs, talking about our efforts at Guantanamo Bay. That is ongoing. We're leaning forward on supporting the president's directive to make sure that we have a location for violent criminal illegals as they are deported out of the country. No one's going to wait on the Defense Department, and we're working that in real time. But I also wanted to give an update on the tragedy that happened last night here in Washington, D.C., and provide a little bit more information as we are actively working to investigate and understand what occurred and why. At about 8:48 last night, a UH-60 assigned to the U.S. Army Aviation Brigade in the Military District of Washington, Fort Belvoir, Virginia, collided tragically with a civilian airliner. The unit involved, the Army unit involved, was Bravo Company 12th Aviation Battalion at Fort Belvoir. It was an annual proficiency training flight. And when we look at the crew, and not all kin have been notified, so we're going to withhold ranks and names at this point. We do know on our side who was involved. It was a fairly experienced crew, and that was doing a required annual night evaluation. They did have night vision goggles. The 12th Aviation Battalion, as of now, is granted a 48-hour operational pause on contingency missions as what happened is reviewed, and a senior level aviation team, an investigative team from our Aviation Safety Center, was deployed last night and already is in Washington, D.C. to investigate what's going on. We anticipate that the investigation will quickly be able to determine whether the aircraft was in the corridor and at the right altitude at the time of the incident. As I mentioned, next of kin notifications are ongoing. It's a tragedy, a horrible loss of life for those 64 souls on that civilian airliner, and of course, the 3 soldiers in that Black Hawk. They're in our prayers, their families and their communities as people are notified. I can't imagine. And I know it's gone from a rescue mission to a recovery mission, and we're with all the first responders that are moving actively too. So at the Defense Department, our thoughts and prayers go out. We are actively investigating to find out what happened and why, and as we get updates, you will have them. God bless.
Okay, that was released by the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, I think about 20 minutes ago. So it's real time. Tom Pappert, our lead political reporter, your thoughts on this tragedy yesterday in Washington, D.C. 67 people apparently dead, no survivors, according to the local responders early this morning. You viewed it. What are your thoughts on this, Tom Pappert?
Well, thanks for having me on, Michael. It's obviously very heartbreaking. I was actually born and raised in Wichita, Kansas, so I'm kind of eagerly awaiting the manifest to find out exactly who was on board. We know that 64 people are believed dead from the plane itself. The other three are understood to have been flying the helicopter. Right now, there's not a lot of information as to what could have possibly caused this. We do know, and I hate to make this instantly political, but Michael, this is a serious problem in the country. Since 2013, we have seen our aviation industry, specifically aircraft control, adopt DEI. This started under the Obama administration in 2013, and it advanced extremely fast under the Biden administration. And I do wonder if that had something to do with it. I can say that I watched the press conference from Wichita today, saw Representative Ron Estes and Mayor Lily Wu. It seems at this point there's very little information being given out from the airline, American Airlines. The manifest has not yet been provided to any of the cities or any of the local governments. And again, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what the Trump administration is able to come away from this in terms of safety in aviation. I think this is going to be a new focus for the Trump administration that is going to be very important.
This was an American Airlines commuter flight from Wichita, direct from Wichita to Washington, D.C. There were 60 passengers on board and 4 crew members. 64 people died. And when you saw the video of it, I mean, this was not survivable. The 3 members of the military were in that helicopter, and Secretary of Hegseth just a few minutes ago said it was a fairly experienced crew. I want to get to some of that video here in a minute, but let's go back to the press conference in Wichita, Kansas, where you were born and raised. So you know a lot of these people. The other point that I'll point out, there are some reports that on that some of the passengers were in the figure skating community. And there was a report, I don't know if you saw this, but there was a report that 2 former Russian world figure skating champions were on that plane. Did you see that report? And what level of confidence do we have in that report?
So that has not been confirmed by any government sources yet. However, yes, it was reported this morning from some local media in Kansas that there were multiple members of that figure skating team that were on board that flight. They had been in Wichita for about a week prior. They were doing a national event in Wichita, and it had just concluded, and they were flying to Washington, D.C. So while it is yet to be confirmed, there are multiple reports indicating, I've seen, Michael, the number is up to 12 figure skaters were on board that flight.
Oh, wow. Wow. Well, that is, that's not good. That's not good at all. The other question that I have for you, let's just talk about things that don't make sense, right? This has been this is the worst aviation disaster in the United States in 15 years, even maybe more than that. And you listen to a lot of the officials saying, well, we have the safest air traffic system, aviation system in the world, except did not have it last night. It was not the safest. In fact, if you look at it, I'm not an aviation guy. I'm just somebody that watched the reports. You see that American Airlines flight just coming in on a normal trajectory. But then you see, and if you look at the video, you've got the airplane here, and then you've got this smaller helicopter. And it looks like the helicopter is coming from below, almost as if it's, aiming. I mean, it's what it looks like. Almost as if it's aiming at the plane. That's just, it's hard to process how that happened. I don't know if you had a similar reaction to it. And again, this is just, a non-aviation guy looking at it.
Well, and I'm the same, Michael, but no, as I watched that, I'm just sitting there thinking, how is nobody in the air traffic control catching this? How is nobody seeing this? And again, maybe that had nothing to do with it. I'm not trying to assign blame, But should there not be somebody who is tracking two blips on a radar going closer and closer together until what we all saw happened? And again, I wonder if this Biden Obama recreation of air traffic safety control, they've changed some of the testing, Michael, where you're now no longer required to have all of these degrees and have this institutional knowledge. Instead, well, if you're the right race or gender, you might go ahead.
Yeah,
and
we
get
don't
the
know the
job.
details of this, but if I listen to these are just questions, right? We
Right.
will get the answers, when the investigation is over, and there will be an investigation. But you listen to the audio. If you listen to that audio of the communication between the air traffic controller and the helicopter, and apparently there were two different communication systems. It's not clear if they were sending and receiving each on the same one. But just as that video, you see that video beginning with the helicopter moving directly at, it appears, the plane, you hear from the air traffic controller, hey, have you seen this plane? Go behind it. Go behind it. Now, to me, the command, again, non-aviation guy, if you see that, the command, the logical command that I would say is you decrease your altitude. That would be the one instead of increase your altitude. I don't know if you had a similar reaction to it, Tom.
Well, and maybe they were thinking, okay, I'll get above the plane if we're going to be landing after them. We do know that this was not at the primary runway there in Washington, D.C. at Reagan. This was the secondary runway that I guess is a lot shorter, and it takes some maneuvering for airplanes to get into place here. So it could be the helicopter is trying to think, well, if I'm coming in behind them, that should maybe mean that I'm above them. It's hard to understand exactly what they were thinking at the time. I will say that it would not surprise me if they couldn't see each other. It's a big city, there's lots of lights, and this helicopter is designed to be about as dark as you could possibly imagine. I've heard that if you're looking at it from above, you just see some kind of green glowing thing in the distance. You don't even necessarily know it's an aircraft. So I do think that they were probably going or depending entirely on their air traffic controllers.
Yeah, the other thing that we got from the Secretary Hegseth's statement video statement released just about half an hour ago now. He said it was a fairly experienced crew. Okay, that raises a question. I think, look, you're going to investigate who were these guys, who were the three crew members. And, I mean, you're going to have to look at, is there anything in their background that would suggest something untoward? I mean, you got to look at that, I think. The other thing that seems very weird about this, you've got this Reagan National Airport, which is, if you ever gone in, it's very steep to get into. I've flown into it hundreds of times, but the descent is a challenge. There's a military base right on the other side of the river. That seems like an odd place for a military base.
Well, it does, and maybe it's there for important national defense reasons that we don't quite understand.
Yeah.
It does make you wonder, though. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, said this is something that has to be done, I guess, annually. They have to get certified on their nighttime flying. So I wonder why there was not more coordination.
Lots of questions on that.
Reagan.
Tom, when we come back, we're going to turn our attention to what's going on in Tennessee this morning, just a stone's throw from our studios here in Nashville, Tennessee. Back with Tom Pappert after this.
My fellow Americans, I have to tell you about my good friends at D.T. McCall & Sons. They have furniture and appliances and a lot more. They've been family-owned in Middle Tennessee for over 100 years, and they're not going to rip you off. No hidden charges, no delivery charges, no charges for all of the crazy things. These are sick people at the lumber yards. These are very sick people. They charge you for cords and hoses and haul off. They charge you for all of these things. They call them hidden charges. It's the type of surprise that you don't want to see. It's like an October surprise, but it's worse. D.T. McCall & Sons, they're not going to do that. They're great people. They're going to give you a great deal. With locations in Lebanon, Carthage, Lafayette, Cookeville, and Franklin, D.T. McCall & Sons will give you the deal of your life. Check them out today or go to dtmccalls.com.
Impersonator not endorsed by Donald Trump.
Welcome back to the Michael Patrick Leahy Show. Now, here's Michael Patrick Leahy.
We're joined by a lead political reporter at the Tennessee Star and the Star News Network, Tom Pappert. Tom, our lead story at TennesseeStar.com, TennesseeStar.com right now is by you. Headline, Tennessee State House removes disruptive audience after Representative Justin Jones delivers speech denouncing immigration bill. As our listeners know, the Tennessee General Assembly is in special session called by the Governor Bill Leahy, to address three issues. Education Freedom Act, number one, which is school choice. And number two, providing a relief to the hurricane victims in East Tennessee, Hurricane Helene. And number three, putting an immigration bill that specifies how state law enforcement will help the Donald Trump Department of Homeland Security to deport illegal aliens. So what happened yesterday in the Tennessee House of Representatives?
Well, Michael, it of course involves Representative Justin Jones. And for the national audience who may not know, this is kind of the go-to left-wing rabble-rouser in Tennessee. He's a member of the so-called Tennessee Three. Two of them were removed from the House a couple years ago, almost instantly made their way back in, being voted in by local constituents or county boards. And since then, they have essentially done everything they can to advance a left-wing agenda in Nashville, Tennessee. So yesterday, Jones was delivering a speech against the immigration component of this special session, arguing that it's racist, unconstitutional, that we might as well tear down the Statue of Liberty. I don't know who in Tennessee is going to make their way to New York Harbor and do that, but that was the arguments made by Jones. And immediately afterwards, it took me a while to understand what was happening, and I don't even know if the mic will pick this up, but you started to hear this, the snapping. This is what's happening in Nashville now.
Are they a bunch of communist beatniks from the 1950s? Is that what it is?
That is what it seems.
Is that what you thought?
Instead of jazz hands, I guess they did the snapping. Yeah. So they began snapping to celebrate the speech, and then I guess one of them began speaking. And if you don't know, the Tennessee State House, it's a relatively small space. So Representative William Lambert, the House leader, is attempting to answer some questions about this legislation before it comes to a vote, and he gets distracted by the snapping, and somebody is speaking now, and it's probably 12 feet away from him that this is happening, Michael. So very quickly, these people, it seemed to be 4 people, were removed. They were told that if they can behave themselves, they would be allowed back in later in the day. But of course, the local left-wing media in Nashville, Tennessee, is trying to make it seem like this was a big deal, that snappers got kicked out for about 45 minutes.
I think we need to do a Saturday Night Live skit on this, Yeah. Get the lefty commies there going, hey, yeah, it's cool, man.
Well, it was truly bizarre, too. I'm sitting there thinking, at first I'm wondering, are the Tennessee Volunteers, are we going to have to get a bus and go to New York? Are we going to tear down the Statue of Liberty? And then next thing you know, I'm like, is the mic crackling? Is there something wrong with the audio feed? Oh, no. Okay, we're going to get rid of the disruptors. Very good.
So this morning, according to Speaker of the House, Cam Sexton, who we met with here in our studios yesterday, there will be a vote on the Tennessee Education Freedom Act, which basically allows for 20,000 K-12 students out of 1 million are allowed to get $7,000 scholarships, which they can take anywhere. That bill, it looks like, is set, according to Speaker Sexton, it looks like it's scheduled in the House to get between 52 and 55 votes. Well, you need 50 for it to pass. The state Senate is going to sail through. Now, what I thought was interesting, yesterday, Donald Trump endorsed this bill. And I thought that was, or actually on Tuesday endorsed this bill. And I thought that it was very significant in terms of influencing some of the state representatives on the margin. Your thoughts on that, Tom Peppert?
I would say it's very significant, and I would add a new dimension to it. We know that President Trump and Governor Bill Lee have had a very tenuous relationship. I think it was just 90 days before the election, Trump called Bill Lee a rhino, and then they kind of made up in the weeks afterwards. So I don't think that President Trump endorsed the Education Freedom Act just as a favor to a fellow Republican. I think this endorsement means that the president thinks this is a very good thing for the children and the families of Tennessee, and I think it would be foolish for any Republicans to stand against it when it has the support of, again, every president every politician on the Republican side, from the dog catcher up to the White House.
And there's some what I call the grifter populist crowd that purports to be Republican or conservative, that is aligning with the Democrats against this, and that is just beyond bizarre. Any thoughts on that, Tom Peppert?
Well, I think it's ill-conceived and ill-considered. A lot of them are saying they're in rural districts. This doesn't do anything for my constituents, so why should I care? But it also, I would argue, it doesn't hurt your constituents. And instead, you're choosing to behave with inaction, and you're hurting children in other parts of Tennessee. So the excuse or the explanation doesn't stand to reason, in my opinion. And it seems to me these people are listening to unintelligent consultants, to put it mildly.
I like that phrasing. Tom Peppert, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it, as always.
Thank you, Michael. Anytime.
All right. When we come back after the news, we'll hear from Cheryl Fritz with the Michigan News Source. Senator Gary Peters, a Democrat, surprised everybody. He's not running for a re-election in 2026. Why is that? Cheryl will have some answers when we get back.